Let's recap the early rounds of our first mock draft for 2026. Up next on Fantasy Baseball Today Express. Welcome into FBT Express on Friday, November 14th. I am Frank Stanfield, joined by Scott White, and let's take a look at our first mock draft, 12-team roto. I was picking 5th, Scott was picking 10th. We'll take a look at the early rounds here, and I will pull up the draft board, the draft list for those watching on YouTube as well. Scott, the top 5 picks, no surprise here really in terms of the players drafted. We had Ohtani, Judge, Soto, J-Ram, Jose Ramirez, and Bobby Witt Jr. But I guess Bobby Witt going 5th of the 5 is a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, mild surprise. I kind of view these first 5 picks as if there's a 1 and 1A between Ohtani and Judge. I actually have Judge first, but it could go either way. And then the next 3 are kind of like a 3, 3A, and 3B. I do have Bobby Witt as the 3, the first of them, because I feel like we kind of saw his worst case scenario, or close to it anyway, in 2025. Clearly the best batting average bet of the 3. And I think the most likely to be a plus in all 5 categories, maybe in the entire player pool, the most likely to be a plus in all 5 categories is Bobby Witt. So I'll take him 3rd, but I don't really blame anyone if they prefer Soto and Ramirez instead. Like I said, 3, 3A, 3B for me.
All right, 6 through 12, we had Elly De La Cruz, Corbin Carroll, Kyle Tucker, Ronald Acuna Jr., Tarek Skubal, Garrett Crochet, and Julio Rodriguez. Elly De La Cruz maybe a touch high based on our early rankings here on the podcast. And Tarek Skubal, Scott, 10th overall to you. I'm not used to you drafting a pitcher in the first round.
No, I don't normally. It's been a few years since I've been willing to pay the premium for the highest end starting pitcher, the one that's going to cost you, in this case, a first round pick. But every year the player pool is a little different. And I think what we're looking at with this year's player pool is a very clear top 3 at starting pitcher, with Skubal, Crochet, and the one who slipped to round 2, Paul Skeens. They are, I think, so clearly ahead of the next tier at starting pitcher. I'm not even sure I'd draft from that next tier until like round 4. Clear advantage. They've proven their durability, and just in terms of what they're going to provide statistically, so far ahead that I'm willing to take on the inherent risk of drafting a pitcher so early. I mean, the main reason I don't like doing it is because they're so injury prone and so volatile relative to the hitters. But, hitters go wrong sometimes too. I think the advantage that these particular starting pitchers, that trio gives you this year, justifies the added risk.
All right, we are into round 2, and the top half of this round, we saw Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Paul Skeens, Francisco Lindor went to you, then Cal Raleigh, Fernando Tatis Jr., and Nick Kurtz. So, 2 names that might stand out here. We are not used to seeing them this early in drafts. The big dumper, Cal Raleigh, going at pick 13, 14, 15, 16, and then Nick Kurtz at pick 18. Big sluggers this past season. Scott, are you all right with these guys going in the early to mid-second round? Cal Raleigh, Nick Kurtz.
Well, Cal Raleigh went 16th, and I rank him 16th.
Boom.
Nick Kurtz went 18th, and I rank him 17th. So I guess I am okay with them going where they went. Now, Vladimir Guerrero was taken ahead of him. I have Vladimir Guerrero quite a bit behind. That's probably the biggest eyebrow raiser to me. He's more like a late second rounder, certainly behind Kurtz, because his home run production for a non-base stealer really isn't. It wasn't this past year where you want it to be for Vladimir Guerrero. And, you look at 2023, he hit just 26 home runs that year. So it's been a recurring problem for Guerrero. But as for Raleigh and Kurtz, there's some downside risk. Obviously, they could take a step back. Cal Raleigh almost has to, given that he hit a dozen more home runs than any other catcher ever. But let's say he regresses from 60 to 48. That's still probably worth a second round pick, getting that from a catcher. So there's a lot of regression built into even taking him 16th overall. It could not work out, but that is true for anyone else I think you could take at this point. Yeah, I mean, who do you want to name? Vladimir Guerrero, like I said, he didn't work out taking him where you took him last year, and people are still taking him at that spot anyway.
Yeah, and the massive postseason Big World Series obviously helped Vlad Jr. We did this draft 2 weeks ago while the World Series was going on, so perhaps that was a little bit influential on the Vlad Jr. pick there as well. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be back right after this.
Only CBS Sports can bring you big time during the heart of Saturday afternoons.
It's big time.
It's big time. It's big time. It's big time.
On CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
Welcome back in FBT Express, taking a look at the early rounds of our first mock draft for 2026. We left off with Nick Kurtz at pick 18 there, and that was followed up by Gunnar Henderson, Jackson Churio, Ketel Marte, Junior Caminero, Kyle Schwarber, and Trey Turner. So Junior Caminero, Scott, obviously we talked about him a lot this year. You wrote a song about him. We were very excited about him. People need to get used to seeing him in the second round. And you know what might even surprise people more? Pick 22 in this draft, the early ADP is actually closer to like 14, 15. So it's more like a early second rounder on Junior Caminero.
Yeah, it is. And I think it makes sense because you look at the state of third base right now, and here you have a 21-year-old who just hit 45 home runs. Honestly, Junior Caminero's technically his sophomore season, it went far beyond anything any of us could have expected for him. And there is probably the biggest element of uncertainty is that he's going from that spring training facility where the Rays were playing their home games in 2025 back to Tropicana Field, which isn't going to be as hitter-friendly of an environment. Sometimes there have been complaints over the years about the batter's eye there, though not everybody seems to be so impacted by that. So that would be the biggest fear of Caminero taking a step back. But if you want a stud third baseman, and you want someone who, for doing what he did at 21, you kind of wonder just what the final upside looks like. It's the ultimate ceiling for Caminero. I can understand taking him in round 2. And in fact, I would too. I believe I have him in my own rankings just behind Nick Kurtz, 18th overall.
All right, let's move on to round 3, where we saw Jazz Chisholm, Pete Crow-Armstrong, Pete Alonso, James Wood, Yordan Alvarez, and Logan Gilbert. So Gilbert is the SP4 here at pick 30. That means there was a 16-pick gap between pitchers, with Paul Skeens at 14 and then Logan Gilbert as the 4th pitcher off the board at pick 30 there. So I think that's a bit surprising. Pete Crow-Armstrong and James Wood, Scott, two guys that scuffled to the finish line here, really rough second halves, yet they still find themselves in the early third round. Do you think that makes sense?
Yeah, I do think it makes sense if you're not overemphasizing their second half. So in season, we made the mistake of overemphasizing their first half, right? Now in the offseason, you can make the mistake of overemphasizing the second half. Every season has peaks and valleys. And generally speaking, you're better off looking at the full season line and having that as the baseline expectation. And the full season line for both Pete Crow-Armstrong and James Wood is worth at least a third round pick. Plus, they're young. They may still have growth ahead of them. I'd be worried if we were investing like an early second round pick in them, passing up other maybe safer options. But here early in round 3, they kind of form the barrier between the surefire early round hitters and then those that pretty clearly don't have that kind of upside. So Crow-Armstrong and Wood, I think, do have that kind of upside, a little riskier. So it makes sense that they form that barrier there. And Yordan Alvarez, who's going a couple picks behind them, obviously he slipped to round 3 more for health concerns, but it's the same sort of thing. He has that early round upside just with a little more risk.
The back half of round 3, we saw Mookie Betts, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Christopher Sanchez, Matt Olson, Bryce Harper, and Rafael Devers. If you want to hear more about this draft, then you can do so on our full-length podcast, Fantasy Baseball Today. You can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Thanks for listening to Fantasy Baseball Today Express, and we will be back again next week. Bye-bye!